to throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast, coming at you guys live on a Friday night, as we promised you we would be doing here every Friday night as we are in the off season. Of course, tons of news to get to on this edition of the podcast. Carolina's schedule officially released, so we'll break that down for you guys. One that I think for a lot of Carolina fans, they really liked for a multitude of reasons. You also have Natrone Means expected to be the Tar Heels running back coach. So Carolina making another hire to their staff, one of the final ones that they have to make. And then on the way out, of course, I'm going to have to update you guys on all of the recruiting stuff that has been going on. Carolina with 5 new commits in the 2025 class since we last saw you here. Also, some news with a couple other targets that they have in the 2025 class. And they do have a couple of quarterbacks that will be taking visits to campus, one of them over the weekend. So make sure you stick around for all of that. But yeah, as I mentioned, Carolina's 2025 schedule officially released the other night. And before I run through it, I think, just we both seen the schedule. I think we look at this as, a schedule that for a lot of people, they might look at it and see this is a chance for Carolina to come out, really compete in year one and everything like that. But what were your initial thoughts on the schedule when it was released the other night?
I think it's one that offers a lot of exciting matchups at home in Kenan Stadium. I think you'll see, you got the first week, you got that Monday night game will be, I think, the most unique environment we've seen in Chapel Hill ever. And I think the only thing that'll ever rival that will be when game day came to town for the Thursday game back in the 97 year, because there's just going to be a lot of anticipation, a lot of hype around Carolina going into that. Of course, your first ACC game coming, against Clemson. So you're, Belichick and Dabo. Dabo, I think, has been one of the guys on the ACC that welcomed him with open arms and understands what it means for the conference and what it could do for them as a football conference, trying to elevate their status. And last time that they came to Chapel Hill, man, Carolina played them to the final whistle and had a chance to win. And then, you look at the back end of the schedule, you finish it up with, but technically 3 straight rivalry games, Wake Forest, Duke, and NC State. And I kind of like that. I kind of like finishing up the season with those guys. So, I think it's a schedule that gives a lot of great matchups. I think it's a schedule that presents an opportunity for Carolina to be playing meaningful football into November. And then I think, you look at the back end, it has a chance for us to really get a sour taste out of our mouths, trying to get some wins over some in-state opponents that took us down last year in heartbreaking fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me is that this team, they want this team in some sort of primetime window as often as possible. They want them to be seen because you've got TCU on the first Monday of the season, non-Saturday game. You've got either the Thursday or Friday night matchup against California. Now, that's a road game. The other thing that you have to be prepared for there as a Tar Heel fan is that there is a good chance that could be a late game. Now, I don't know what exactly that means. I don't know if that means that it's going to be a game that starts at 8 o'clock, which I guess would still be kind of late for some people, especially if it's on Thursday. It could also be a game that starts at 10:30 at night. And that was one of the things that I was worried about with seeing them on the schedule, was that Carolina was going to be given a late night game. But if it is, Carolina is going to be in a standalone window there. And then you've got the Friday game against Syracuse. So Carolina in 3 non-Saturday spots. It shows you that they want to get them on television as much as possible. And of course, there are going to be national games more than likely throughout the year. You'd imagine, depending on how Carolina fares in the non-conference, as long as they don't go 2-2 in the non-conference, or God forbid, any worse than that, you would imagine that game against Clemson will probably be a nationally televised game. The game at the end of the season against NC State will certainly have a lot of eyes on it. And then the game against Duke. I think what you mentioned too, it's really exciting to close with the 3 Big Four teams besides yourself. I think that's a really interesting way to finish the year. Wake Forest is a team that Carolina has had a lot of success against as well here recently. So if they can continue that, and then, Duke, even with the loss last year, a team that Mac Brown had a lot of success with, that game's at home. That could sort of build some momentum and allow Carolina to feel good coming into that matchup against NC State, which I think they're definitely going to need, considering their issues that they've had against NC State. So let's run through the schedule just really quickly if you guys missed it, and then we'll give some more takeaways about what we think about it overall. It starts, as we mentioned, we told you that on the last edition of the podcast as well, Carolina against TCU on September 1st. That's a Monday night at 7:30. That will be a game that has already been scheduled for ESPN. Should be the top crew that will be there for ESPN as well. So a little Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, potentially, SVP could be there, something like that. I don't know if they're going to bring out the game day crew for that one, but I do think that there is going to be some sort of on-campus stuff before the game, some on-campus stuff after the game that will be really cool and something we haven't seen in Chapel Hill really since that 1997 season. You then have the game against Charlotte, Carolina on the road at Charlotte in Jerry Richardson Stadium. That'll be Saturday, September 6th. So a little bit of a short week, but definitely an opponent that Carolina should hope to take care of even with that short week. Then they come back to Kenan Stadium on September 13th. Again, another Saturday game as they take on the Richmond Spiders. Good FCS team a year ago, a team that went to the playoffs, but still one that Carolina should look at as a win on their schedule. At least they should hope so. Then Carolina closes out the non-conference on the road. They will head to Orlando, Florida, Bright House Financial Field to take on the Central Florida Knights, a team that is going through a coaching transition of their own. Charlotte also going through a coaching transition. So 2 of the 4 schools that you're going to see having to bring in new coaches just like you are. That'll be on September 20th, that Saturday. Then Carolina has a bye week. They will then take on Clemson to open conference play in Kenan Stadium. That one on Saturday, October 4th. The Tigers, you would expect, will roll in there pretty highly ranked, especially with the non-conference schedule that they have. They do have a tough test out of the gate against LSU, but if they can navigate that, they should be in pretty good position. You've got another bye week for Carolina after that. So that's interesting. Certainly something that we'll talk about here. And then you go on the road for that game either on the Thursday night or the Friday night against Cal. Regardless, you're going to get extra time to prepare for that game. You'll get extra time to prepare yourself. Might even fly out early to be on the West Coast there and get used to the time change and everything like that. So I do like that part of it for Carolina as they'll take on Cal in one of those two spots on the weekday before they then return home to play Virginia in Kenan Stadium on Saturday, October 25th. So a little bit of extra time even there to prepare for Virginia, a rivalry matchup, and one that Carolina should hope to win if they are going to compete in the ACC. Then they go on the road, short week. One of the only short weeks that Carolina has to deal with outside of that one to begin the season when they have that 5-day period with Charlotte. You'll have 6 days in between games here, and then they'll travel up to Syracuse, New York. That'll be Friday, October 31st, so a Halloween night game against the Syracuse Orange. One of the tougher games probably on Carolina's schedule. Syracuse coming off a great first year under Fran Brown. You move to the month of November, a little bit of extra time to prepare for the game at home against Stanford. That'll be Saturday, November 8th. So the good news is that Carolina avoids having to go west twice. It looks like for the time being that for the most part, it's going to be that you're going to face one or the other, out there on the West Coast. The other one will be at home between these two schools. So Carolina welcomes Stanford to Chapel Hill. Yet another game that if you want to compete, you should be able to win. You then have to go on the road to Winston-Salem to take on Wake Forest. That's a spot that Carolina, has had some decent success at. So we'll see ultimately what Carolina can do with that one. Saturday, November 15th, followed by Saturday, November 22nd, where Carolina will be at home against the Duke Blue Devils. That'll be the first time in a long time that I can remember that being senior day for Carolina against the Blue Devils, probably since they moved from facing Duke to close the regular season to facing NC State to close the regular season. And, of course, that will be who Carolina will close the regular season with. The NC State Wolfpack, Saturday, November 29th, on the road in Raleigh. So as I mentioned, one of the things that I thought was very interesting about this schedule is the positioning of the bye weeks. You get the bye week before Clemson, which I think everybody really likes that. We knew that was going to be the case, too, when they revealed the conference opener and you already knew the non-conference slate. But what do you think about then following it up with another bye week, granted before you go out on the road, out to California to take on the Golden Bears?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think the travel has to do a lot with it. I guess, I don't know how they went about it. They maybe asked for their input. Would you rather have the bye week before you go out there or have a bye week after you come back? The good news is with Bill Belichick's experience at the NFL level, he's going to know what's best to get his guys acclimated to the West Coast time zone. More importantly, it gives you a chance to be as healthy as possible going into the game with the bye week beforehand, where after a month, Carolina's going to be dinged up, so that you get a chance to get healthy. But then if you get dinged up coming out of the Clemson game and, you would imagine that with as physical as the Tigers are, you're going to have some bumps and some bruises, so you get a chance to kind of get healthy again. And then from there, it's a 7-game sprint to the end of the regular season, but you're not going to see a team of the caliber of Clemson the rest of the way. So it's odd that you see it that way, but I think it really benefits Carolina because the Clemson game is going to be the measuring stick for Bill Belichick and his program in year one. And so the fact that you have a chance to have 2 weeks to fully prepare, and if assuming he hasn't lost his fastball, you would expect a good game plan to be put together by Belichick and the coaching staff. I think it's fair to expect Carolina to compete for 4 quarters in that game. And then you have a chance to come out of that game to kind of regroup, refresh, and then, go and play the back end of your schedule. So, maybe not what the coaches would like. They probably like the bye week more spread out, but considering how big the Clemson game is, I kind of like that both of the bye weeks are sandwiched around that one game.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the positives of being able to rest up after that, being able to get yourself out to the West Coast, get prepared for the time change, everything like that. Certainly, I think that's an advantage. The thing that scares me a little bit about this is that, then you have to play 7 straight games to close the regular season. And we've seen how banged up this team can get. Now, you would hope that with a new training staff and everything like that, they will hopefully be able to have these guys prepared for that type of grind to finish the season out. And the thing that I will say is if you're looking for a coach that's going to be able to handle that, Bill Belichick is your guy. In the NFL, you get 1 bye week. That's it. And so he is going to have everybody prepared where if there are injuries and you eventually have to go to other guys on the roster, you'd imagine that these guys will be ready to go. So that's the hope, is that you build up enough depth that you can get through that difficult part. Because, on the surface, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. To be honest with you, I mean, maybe you'd rather take away that bye week in front of the Clemson game, before the Clemson game. And you have to, prepare for that one where you don't get 14 days to prepare for it, but maybe you get, a week, and later in the season, you get a bye week when you need it. But I definitely think that that's something that Bill Belichick and the staff, they will turn it into an advantage for them. And hopefully it allows them to potentially come out 2-0 through that stretch. That would be amazing, because that would involve a win over the favorite to win the ACC this upcoming season. But maybe they could use that to their advantage. Now, the big thing here is that, everybody's expectations are kind of all over the place with Bill Belichick. It really just depends on how you feel about him coming to the college game and how much of a learning curve you think there's going to be. When you look at this schedule, what do you think the expectation should be from fans going into this season?
What the expectation should be in a normal year, every year for Carolina football, which is 8-4. This year to me is all about and I'm gonna say this over and over again. This is the foundational year for Bill Belichick and Carolina. This is all about just setting the standard and creating the culture and overhauling the environment that exists around this program off the field. And you really look towards 2026 as being the year for Carolina to make some noise. So that's what the expectation should be. If Carolina wins that week 1 game against TCU, and it's way too early now to call that game, but if they find a way to win that game, and with the way that you have at Charlotte, in Richmond, you'll be staring at a 3-0 start. There's a path for Carolina to win 9-10 games in the regular season. Because I think the losses that you're looking at that you would say are for sure losses would maybe be the Clemson game, just because, they got Kay Klubnik back. Dabo found the portal. They pushed Texas, even though they lost in the opening round of the playoff. You should go win at Cal, but considering it's going to be the first time that you've ever gone out west during the middle of the regular season like they're going to do, it's until we kind of get used to doing that could be a game where Carolina just has a hiccup. And then you look at the game at Syracuse. Fran Brown proved last year, man, he's not no joke. And that program is going to be the force is too strong a word, but they're going to be a competitor. And, that place hosting Bill Belichick on a Friday night could be a raucous environment. And maybe Carolina goes up there and gets caught in a shootout. So, I would say 8-4, but if they find a way to beat that TCU team, which I think went 8-4 in the regular season, I think they won their bowl game. If Carolina gets that win out of the gate and they can build some momentum, then maybe Bill Belichick gets off to a faster start and has the type of impact in year 1 that we're hoping for year 2, year 3, and on down the road.
Yeah, I think the safe expectation for a lot of people is somewhere in that 8-4, 9-3 range, because it is going to take time. And that's the thing that I think people really have to understand here, is that if they lose that season opener against TCU, you can't just give up on the season. You can't say, well, they should have won that game. That shows you that it's the same old Carolina football and that we're not going to be a competitive team in the ACC. I don't think that means that at all, because I think this schedule, honestly, is very easy compared to a lot of the other schedules you're going to see in the ACC. You've got to think you avoid Miami, SMU, no Georgia Tech on there, which has been a thorn in your side for a while. They're expected to be competitive this year again as well. No Louisville and no Florida State if they bounce back. You don't have any of those teams on there. Now, I think that Syracuse is still going to be legit. Cal, as you said, is going to be a tough road trip having to go out west. And then Clemson, yes, Clemson is, of course, difficult. The other one, I always am going to put State in there until you actually find a way to beat that team. Doesn't really matter that their coach is on the hot seat, that they're going to come in with basically no expectations. Those are the years where Dave Doran has really thrived. It's very similar to what we've seen from Carolina, where the years that they have expectations, that's when they end up struggling. So Carolina's got to be prepared for all those teams. You never know what Duke could be as well after this type of year that they had this past year. So I think it's a schedule that presents challenges, but it's not a difficult schedule. And so I think the 8-4, 9-3 expectation is probably where you need to be. Well, now we can go through and we could do the very fun win-loss game if we want to do that really quickly here to sort of gauge where we're at. Remember, when we did this last year, we were pretty down on where the team was standing at. And by the time that we got to the regular season and revisited it, we thought that this team was going to make was going to have a pretty successful season. So I'll let you start out. TCU at home on that first Monday night to start the season. Do you have that as a win or a loss?
I'll say Carolina wins that game just because the energy, the emotion might be one, like with the Miami game when Mac Brown first came back, to where almost I think the 52,000 of us will be in the stadium will Carolina to a victory. I think it'll be a fun game. I think it has shootout written all over it. Probably first one to 40 probably wins that game. I think Bill Belichick will want to come out and make a statement, make it known, hey, this isn't a joke. Like, I'm here, I'm coaching, we're here to win. So I think Carolina gets off to a fast start. I think they win on that Monday night.
Yeah, this is a tough one because TCU reminds me a lot of how I felt about West Virginia coming into this year, where they were coming off a successful season. You started feeling like this next year it is the year where they're actually going to succeed. I don't think this team's going to have the bust potential that West Virginia had this year. And you saw it. West Virginia really struggled. I think TCU ends up winning this game. I think it'll be a close one. It'll be one of those ones that'll probably be a little bit heartbreaking. But I do think that TCU is a team that's going to compete in the Big 12 this year. And I think that this is one that you should still hold your heads up high afterwards when Carolina ends up falling. But I think it'll set the stage and you'll see some really promising things, especially if you do end up starting freshman quarterback Bryce Baker. I think that might be asking him just a little bit too much as a true freshman to come in there, start right away. Ryan Brown, even if he's the guy, could have some bumps in the road. But I'll put that one as a loss to begin the season. This one pretty easy on the road at Charlotte. Do you have that one as a win or a loss?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and do the next two games. I think Carolina wins both of them. I think they win on the road at Charlotte. That's a program, new coach, a big transition year for them after Biff Poggi was one of the biggest laughingstocks we've seen in the last 5 years at the college level. Expect a lot of Carolina fans to show up, show out. Even though it's going to be a road game, it's still in our home state. I think Carolina gets the win there, and then they go back home against a Richmond program that it has been successful at times, but that's one where if Carolina loses, there's going to be multiple alarms going off in Chapel Hill. I think Carolina wins both of those games to get out to a quick 3-0 start.
Oh, yeah. If they lose the game to Richmond, I think there will be people that will want to set this experiment on fire already. I don't see that happening. I know they're a good team, but I think Carolina finds a way to win that one. And, yeah, Charlotte, I mean, look, I love Tim Albin. I think that hire was a really, really good one that's going to pan out for them. And I'm kind of glad that Carolina is ending this home and home with them sooner rather than later, because I think there's a chance that he could build something pretty decent there. I think that Carolina is able to get past this game. I think early in the season, especially, Charlotte's going to be doing a lot of what Carolina is going to be doing, and the talent simply isn't going to be there. Carolina gets the win. Then Carolina, as we mentioned, goes on the road to Central Florida. Do you think that one is a win or a loss down there in Orlando?
Yeah, this one I think is going to be tricky. Scott Frost back with that Central Florida program. We know all the success he had there. They claimed the national championship in the 2017 year. You would imagine that they're going to be fun, high-powered offense. It's a road game. A lot of heat, humidity. I think Carolina loses that game.
Hey.
I think that's the first loss that they take under Bill Belichick in 2025, but not a loss that I think you should be upset about. I think if Carolina goes down there and gets beat, it would make a lot of sense in a lot of different ways. Basically, I think it's the inverse of the TCU game. Yep. Like, I think if Carolina loses to TCU, I think Carolina comes back and they beat Central Florida. I have Carolina beating TCU. Therefore, I think they'll lose this game on the road to the Golden Knights.
Yeah, see, I got them winning this game because I think that, especially if Bryce Baker is the starter, which is what I think is going to happen as of right now, I think it's going to take him some time to sort of settle in. And people would point back and say, look at how well Sam Howell played in his first game. They ended up beating a South Carolina team that came in with huge expectations that season. I get it. But I do think this one sets up much better. Even though it's a road game, I think by this time, Carolina will potentially be in a little bit of a rhythm following those Charlotte and Richmond performances. I think offensively, you'll be feeling confident in your group. And same thing defensively. I think you'll have some answers about where this defense is at. I think they'll do enough. And the thing about Central Florida is I think it's going to take them a little bit of time to readjust to what Scott Frost wants to do. I think they're a good team. I don't think that they're as good as that TCU team, and that's the difference to me. I think Carolina goes on the road and gets the victory over Central Florida. Get the bye week, then you get ready to face Clemson at home in Kenan Stadium. Do you have that one as a win or a loss?
Yeah, I'd love to think Carolina could win that game. This Clemson team, I think, is going to be even better than they were this past year when they won double-digit games. They won the ACC again, and they made their triumphant return to the college football playoff. Cade Klubnik's going to be a top 3 to 5 quarterback in the sport next year. I mentioned Dabo's found the portal. They haven't lost their luster on the recruiting trail. I think it's a lot like it was, though, back in 2019 where Carolina pushes them to the brink. And you feel comfortable and confident that this thing is heading in the right direction under Bill Belichick and the staff that he has assembled. So I think Carolina loses a close game at home to Clemson, but one that shows the growth and the progress and the direction the program is headed under Bill Belichick.
Yeah, right there with you. I think that this is one of those games where the college coach that is a really great mind has a little bit of an advantage, at least at this point in Bill Belichick's college coaching career. I think Dabo comes in here. And again, I'm with you. I think it's going to be a really close game because I think you always want to catch Clemson earlier in the season or really towards the middle part of the season. If this is an early afternoon game, those are the types of games that have always given Clemson trouble, just like back in 2019. So I think that Carolina with a young quarterback, more than likely, I do think they put up a little bit of a fight here in this game. But ultimately, I think for Clemson, this defense, I think, is going to be very improved this year under Tom Allen. I thought that was a tremendous hire that they made there at defensive coordinator. So I think that group going to be really tough to solve. And then offensively, I think they're going to have enough. They've went out. They've got some receivers for Cade Klubnik that I think are going to have them as one of the better passing offenses in the country next season. Their running game, I think, is still going to be strong as well. So I think it's just a little bit too much to ask Carolina to get a W in that game. I think they'll come up short in that one. But I do think that they'll be competitive enough to where you'll still say, this team looks like a Bill Belichick led team. So both of us 3-2 at this point in the season. They get another bye week, and then they go on the road to take on the Cal Golden Bears. What do you see happening in that one?
Yeah, I mentioned this could be one just because Carolina hasn't made a trip like this in season, but I think this is where Bill Belichick and these NFL guys will understand what to do in terms of the travel and how to get their bodies ready and acclimated to go out and play on the West Coast. I think the fact that you have the bye week beforehand also plays in Carolina's favor. But I think Carolina they go get a win. Hopefully it's not at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. We're sitting there watching that game go final. But I do think Carolina makes their first trip out west to take on Cal in an ACC game. And I think they come back with the victory.
Yeah, this one's going to be a tough one, no doubt. But I think the fact that they get the bye week and that they can get over there early and sort of settle into what it's going to be like being out on the West Coast, having to deal with the time change and everything like that. I think that's going to be important. Cal, as we saw, if you go back and watch their game against Miami earlier this season, they're a tricky team. They are a team that is good at home, even though they're, a rather average group. Man, Justin Wilcox, we've seen it before. Carolina has been beaten by him before. They know that he is a good coach. I think he'll, show that once again in this one. I think Carolina will be in for a battle. But I think getting over there early is going to be the difference for Carolina. So I like them to go on the road and get the victory in that one as well. Then they come back home and they take on Virginia. What do you see happening in that one?
Yeah, look, Carolina, went on the road last year and beat the crap out of Virginia. You get this game back at home. You've got a better coaching staff around you. And I do think Bill Belichick, will look at these games against rivals and treat them like they were division of games when he was in the NFL. And we knew how he owned the Jets, he owned the Dolphins, and he owned the Bills. I think he'll understand the importance of the rivalry, the significance of the rivalry, and understand that Carolina fans don't like losing to Virginia. So I think Carolina picks up a win in South-Oldest rivalry.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know Virginia is supposed to be better this year. They've done a tremendous job in the transfer portal. I give a lot of credit to Tony Elliott, but I think at home, you demolished this team last year when you were a team that was still struggling. And we look at, what Carolina ultimately ended up becoming at the end of the regular season. And it showed that what they showed in that game wasn't necessarily who they actually were. If you could do that on the road against them, you should be able to find a way to beat them at home. So I think Carolina gets the W there. Then they go on the road to Syracuse, New York on Halloween night. Do you see that one as a win or a loss?
Yeah, I mentioned that as a game that could go either way. We know how good Syracuse was at home a year ago. They were electric. They were explosive. This game being on a short week, Halloween night, something spooky is bound to happen. I think Carolina loses at Syracuse. But again, I'll stress, I think that if they lose to Syracuse, I don't think it's a bad loss because Fran Brown proved this past year, man, he's going to have that program competing. And, that'll be a big spot for his program to be, at home on a Friday night hosting Bill Belichick. So I see it kind of like the Central Florida game where it's probably a shootout, and Carolina comes up a play or two short. I think they fall in that road game to the Orange.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I hate to say it, but I do think he's a heck of a coach. That's a place that's always caused issues for teams. I mean, you remember some of the Clemson teams that went there and either got challenged or actually got beat. I think it'll be very similar for Carolina this year. I think they'll go up there. Look, this is a team that I think is going to compete again to potentially be in that 8-9 win range. So I don't think this is going to be one that you are hanging your head after. But I think short week, I think, is the difference in this one. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think Carolina goes up there and gets beat by the Orange. Then they come home to take on the Stanford Cardinal. What do you think happens in that ACT tale?
Yeah, I think Carolina wins. You have a West Coast team coming east. I don't know Stanford's schedule. Maybe they have a bye week before they come east. I don't know. Nonetheless, Carolina should not lose to Stanford in 2025. And this is the start of the schedule where Carolina could be playing some meaningful football and could have something on the line to play for. So this would be a loss that I think if Carolina were to take it, I think would be a bad loss. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Carolina beats Stanford at home.
This would be a horrific loss because I don't think this team is going to be good at all again this year. They are really going to be the team that everybody should sort of run over. They're the doormat, it feels like, in the ACC for years to come because I don't think they're going to be able to acquire the talent to be able to play in this conference, having to travel across the country. I think that Carolina gets the win pretty easily in this one, and they should if they want to compete in the ACC this season. Then you have the game on the road against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, a team that Carolina's had a lot of success against. Do you think that success continues in this one?
Yeah, look, I think Wake Forest made a really good hire after Dave Clawson stepped down. And I think you can expect these games to be what they have been the last half decade or so. Close, high-scoring shootouts. But nonetheless, I do think Carolina in year one's in a better place in their coaching transition than where Wake Forest is at currently. I know it's a road game, but it's not hard to go into a library and win a football game. I think the Heels go on the road and pick up a win against the Demon Deacons.
Yeah, they've kind of owned these guys. And look, man, I respect Jake Dickert. I really thought that was a good hire when some Wake Forest fans were sort of questioning that. And I think he'll be building something pretty decent there. But I think this is one of those games, again, they're going to be a team that's going to be fighting for bowl eligibility. You're going to be fighting to continue to compete in the ACC, race. So I think if you're going to be able to do that, you've got to find a way to win this game. I think Carolina does go on the road and finds a way to pick up this victory. Then they come back home for the final two games of the season. I mean, they do go on the road to NC State, but they start the final two-game stretch, which features two rivalry matchups with the home game against Duke on Senior Day. Do you see this one as a win or a loss for the Tar Heels?
Yeah, look, we're going to find out just how much Bill Belichick hates Duke. Because I think Carolina and I know Duke made a splash. They went and got Mintz out of the transfer portal and invested a lot of money in him, Manny Diaz in that program. They're coming off a successful year, but if you believe in the law of averages, this program should take a step back because of how many close games they won just a year ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, it felt like every game they were coming back from double-digit deficits and winning games by one or basically by one possession. And usually it felt like a field goal or less. So I think for the guys that were on the roster a year ago that are back, that experienced blowing that 20-0 lead, and really signified the beginning of the end even more so for Mac Brown and his second stint with the Tar Heels. I think it'll be a motivated team. It's the first real rivalry matchup for Bill Belichick as the head coach of Carolina. He proclaims to have hated Duke all of his life. And I think you could see that with how much money he spent on pizzas to feed some fraternities ahead of tomorrow night's basketball game against the Blue Devils. Obviously, the football game does not mean nowhere near as much, but I think you'd want to get that bell back in Chapel Hill. I think Carolina wins the first rivalry game of the Bill Belichick era.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the buying of the pizzas for the fraternities kind of shows you how important he thinks this is. And I think that moment is going to resonate in that locker room. I think there are going to be some guys that are going to be incredibly motivated after getting beat by that team this past year when you were in control of that game. You were up 20-0 in that game and allowed them to storm their way back. I do think they're going to be a good team. I mean, look at the success that they had with Malik Murphy. Now they're going to have a guy in Darian Mensah who I think has a higher upside than him. I think that Carolina will be facing a really good team when they play this game. But this game is in Kenan Stadium. I think this game will mean a ton to Bill Belichick, more than pretty much any game, I think, on this schedule for him personally. And so I don't see any way that Carolina loses this game on Senior Day in Chapel Hill. Then they go on the road to Raleigh to face NC State. And while the game against Duke might be the most important for Bill Belichick personally, he, I think, will understand by this time how important this game is and why Carolina wants to end the losing streak to NC State so badly. Do you think that he is able to get it done in his first season at the helm in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, I do, because I think Carolina's in a better spot than NC State is. And I think if anything, Bill Belichick will pick up some of the stuff that Dave Doran has said over the years about Carolina and use that to motivate his players, because the sentiment hasn't changed because there's a new head coach in town. Like Dave Doran showed you very bluntly how much, I mean, he disrespected a reporter when being asked about Belichick getting hired. Bill's not going to take that lightly, especially for a guy that can't win double-digit games, that can't even win a conference championship. So I think that Belichick will do a much better job than Mac Brown ever thought of doing, of instilling a hatred for them, motivating our guys to go there and kick that team's ass. Because as a fan base, we're tired of losing to them. And I think, as much as he's talked about the stuff with Duke, I do think he'll by that point understand that when it comes to football, that beating them means more to us than it does beating Duke. I think Carolina goes into that building. They get off the schneid. I think Belichick secures back-to-back rivalry wins in his first season. The Heels finish 2025 9-3.
Yeah, I'm with you. And this is probably why people hate the fact that we do this game, because it seems like every time we come out with about the same record. But, I mean, we had a little difference there at the start. But, yeah, I think you mentioned Doran. Remember, C.J. Bailey, the starting quarterback, also said something like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't really care about his history. I still know we're going to beat them no matter what. I think that's going to resonate. And I think you could see it. You talked about divisional matchups. Man, there was a level of hate. I mean, the level of hate for the New York Jets was just over the top. And we still have no idea why that was actually the case. But whatever it was, his players were always motivated. There was hatred for the Bills. There was hatred for the Dolphins. Even though those teams weren't necessarily all that great, they always found ways to take care of business. I think that's going to be the mindset that he's going to take going into this game. And I think he'll learn pretty quickly how much hatred there really is if he hasn't learned already. And I think that if there's a guy that can really do a good job of fueling hatred into positive stuff for his team and, more motivation than anything else, I think he is the guy that's able to do it. I think Carolina finds a way to win that game. Let's move on to the coaching hire that Carolina made today. That would be running backs coach Natrone Means. He comes in, takes over for Larry Porter. And so this is a guy, of course, historic career at Carolina, comes in 1990, became the team's starting running back that season. And from there, he ran for at least 849 yards, at least 10 touchdowns in every season that he was a part of the Tar Heel football program, would spend the next 3 years there. And in 1991 and 92 was named a first-team All-ACC member. In terms of coaching, he's been a guy that has really climbed the ladder everywhere that he's been. He was at Livingstone College, climbed the ladder to the OC. West Charlotte High School, was the OC there, and then resurfaced at Winston-Salem State, eventually climbed his way to being the offensive coordinator and assistant head coach after being their running backs coach, and then was an offensive analyst here for Carolina the last 4 years. So worked under Larry Porter, really got to learn from him, and now gets the opportunity to be the full-time running backs coach. What do you think of this hire? Do you like the fact that they go with a guy that hasn't necessarily proven it at the FBS level that he can be a running backs coach? Or do you think that, this is one of those hires that makes a lot of sense, taking a chance on another younger head coach?
Yeah,
Coach.
I think you just got to like the fact that you're bringing back one of the all-time greats, giving him a position on the staff that he has earned. This isn't a feel-good hire. This not let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya. No, Natrone Means has put in the work, and he's earned the right to be the next running back coach at Carolina. It kind of feels something that you would see a Hubert Davis hire be, where he can talk to these guys and tell them what it was like to play at Carolina and play at a high level and be successful, and also, do what he did in the NFL as well will also go a long way too. So, Larry Porter, I thought, was always a really good coach. You always knew Carolina's running backs were in good hands with him, but I feel pretty confident there won't be a noticeable drop in production with Natrone Means, and it'll be cool having a one of the all-time greats that come through Chapel Hill to be around the program every single day in a coaching capacity. And interested to see what he does with the running back room that, may not have a Marion Hampton, but they're not devoid of talent. And you've got some guys that I think are poised to have some pretty big seasons in 2025.
Well, the thing is that he was here for 4 years. He was here with Marion Hampton. He helped develop him. He was here for a year with Ty Chandler, helped develop him into a guy that ran for 1,000 yards that season. I think that carried a lot of weight here, is that, seeing him probably coach as the team went into their bowl game, he probably stuck out to Bill Belichick and to Michael Lombardi and probably led to this moment where they give him a chance. I like it. Do I think that it is better than if they would have stuck with Larry Porter? Not really, because I think Larry Porter has done it for so long. He has been really good at it. He's a good recruiter, but it's one where I don't mind it at all, but if they would have stuck with Larry Porter, I wouldn't have hated that either. I think both options were pretty solid, and you've got a guy that has the track record at the FBS level that you move on from. You just hope that, this is one of those risks that you're taking that pays off. But I think that Belichick and this staff really did their homework. I think before they made this hire, they looked at how these guys coached during the preparations leading up to bowl season. Clearly, he liked what he saw from Freddie Kitchens. That's why he's going to be the offensive coordinator, even though it didn't really translate onto the field. And clearly, he liked what he saw from Natrone Means and feels like he has the potential to be a really good coach for Carolina. So I like it. I do like the fact that everywhere that he's been, he's sort of climbed the ladder. It shows you that he is a guy that works hard and gets the results that he needs to. It's just that was at a lower division. This will be the first time it'll be at a Division I school. So it'll be interesting to see how he sort of handles that. As I mentioned, Carolina with 5 commitments on the 2025 recruiting trail. And the focus here in the last week was on the linebacker spot. Carolina with 3 linebacker commits. You've got 3-star linebacker Tyler Hauser, the former Wake Forest commit. This is a guy that I think is probably undervalued with how he's ranked. Really like the way that he's able to cover. Another very physical guy that can cover sideline to sideline. We'll, of course, break these guys down more in depth when we get to signing day, which is right around the corner. It's actually, I think, towards the end of next week, if I'm remembering it correctly. It's slipping my mind the exact date. But me and Zach Hubbard will break all these guys down for you in depth. But really like what he brings to the table. He was committed to Wake Forest for a reason, and I think he'll fit what Carolina is wanting with more of a physical mindset which he brings to the table. You got Lance Pascal, a guy who comes from St. Thomas Aquinas High School down in Florida. That right there, I think, should show you how valued he is. Didn't have a great season down there, a little quiet, but still a guy that was good enough to be able to transfer there that they wanted. Really like him as a guy that could be, someone in the future for Carolina that impacts. Another guy that can move sideline to sideline, does a lot of really good things. But again, another guy that Carolina is really just taking a risk on. And then there's Jake Bauer, the unranked linebacker who was formerly committed to Navy. Really like him as well. I think he's a guy that, honestly, it doesn't really make sense how he is unranked. Very, very physical, very, very athletic, can cover sideline to sideline, which I think is it was something this staff is really focusing on, because there were guys that, when Carolina brought him in, I think we thought they could cover sideline to sideline. One guy that, we saw that sort of became the mold of what Carolina was looking for towards the end of the Mac Brown era, though, was Amari Campbell, more of a downhill, aggressive linebacker, likes to get after ball carriers, get after the quarterback, but doesn't necessarily have the speed to cover all the way from, the hash marks and further out. I think they're looking for guys that can cover a lot of space really quickly. They're looking for those athletic types, and I think they've got it. And they're also looking for guys that play with a lot of physicality, and that's what Hauser does, that's what Bauer does, and that's what Pascal does. So it'll be interesting to see those guys. You've then got running back Joseph Trope, who was previously committed to Temple. Like him, I think he's got some really nice speed. Potentially a sleeper in this class at the running back spot. But I liked everything that I saw from him. Pretty decisive player, which is, again, something that Carolina has really been focused on. And I think, that's going to be something you're going to see continue with Natrone Means. Physical backs that get downhill quickly, not focused on trying to, pick their spots in the backfield. I mean, you got patience, but they're not guys that are dancing, that are really trying to hit the home run play. They're focused on getting to, finding that first hole, hitting it as hard as possible, and getting downfield. And he's got the acceleration to be able to pull away. So really like him. And then you've got quarterback Gary Merrill. Now, this one is a very interesting one. He is a guy that is committed to play lacrosse at Carolina. He is the #1 overall midfielder in the 2025 recruiting class on the lacrosse side, but also wants to play football. And so he was offered a scholarship by Bill Belichick. He ends up accepting it. And so Carolina, they bring him in at quarterback. That's where he played at in high school, threw for 1,700 yards this past season, but ran for 1,955 yards as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they end up using him. In terms of the scholarships, this was something, and this is why I stopped putting out the article of the roster update. Someone did remind me that the roster actually expanded. I believe the ACC is enacting this rule that rosters are now, you're allowed to offer 105 guys on scholarship, which means that there are going to be guys that in the past were preferred walk-ons that will be on scholarship. So in terms of him coming in and actually competing, I don't necessarily think that's what you're going to see. When you look at that group, just really quickly, your thoughts, especially Merrill, I think that's really interesting that they bring in a lacrosse player, something that Bill Belichick was known for doing at the NFL level.
Yeah, it was just a matter of time before he got a lacrosse player in here. It benefits both programs. We know he's got a close relationship with the head coach of lacrosse on campus as it is.
Yep.
Not surprised that Carolina continuing to add to the 2025 class. And looks, they're 3-star guys, and they're not highly talented prospects, but I think these are guys that are going to be a big part of what Carolina does from a player development situation. And I think that's got to be something that Carolina fans got to be open-minded to, is that with the way that this thing is put together and what they're going to emphasize, Carolina should be able to develop this 3-star talent and make them become contributors for a team that competes in the ACC year in, year out. So I think once it really got solidified, once he signed his contract, once all the big NFL jobs opened up, it was going to be easier for these kids who were hearing the negative recruiting from the NC States of the world, among other schools, to commit and to buy into Bill Belichick. So, a little bit later than I thought. I did thought initially when he got hired that Carolina was going to see a little boost with the recruiting for the 25 class, but it's better late than never. And I think he and his staff are proving that they can go on the road. They can relate to kids. Right now, they're just trying to, they're looking to add some talent. More importantly, some depth to their roster their first year on campus. And I think you'll see that really carry over in a big way with that 2026 class and beyond.
The thing with the 2025 class, and I've said this a few times, and I really want people to understand this. There are not a lot of guys that are available. With the way that things are set up now, and honestly, I don't think that it is set up the way that it should be. I don't believe there should be an early signing period. I know that that's, a lot of kids think that that's the way to go. And I know people will say, well, that means that you don't get nearly as many guys on campus as early as you want to. Yeah, I get all that. But the thing is with the early signing period, I mean, you've got guys that commit before these coaches are even in place. Now, the good news is that if coaches end up leaving, you do have the opportunity to end up getting away from your letter of intent and becoming a recruit once again. And that's what you've seen with some of these guys. But that's the thing. There's not a lot of guys that are really left out there. I mean, the ones that are uncommitted, I mean, we mentioned Justin Hazenhudel, the 4-star offensive lineman. That's a guy that had to decommit from Georgia Tech in order to even be uncommitted at the time when Carolina was recruiting him. A lot of these guys you're going to have to work on. You're going to have to really dig deep to find some of these gems like a Lance Pascal. But I think that's the thing that Carolina fans have to understand. And my thing, too, is you may look at it and say, well, they're signing a 3-star guy. Jake Bauer is an unranked guy. Why should we really think that highly of these guys? Go watch their highlight tapes and then come back to me. And I get it. That's the best plays that they have on film. But when you watch just how physical some of these guys are, the amount of space that some of these guys can close, I'm telling you, you will see that there is potential there with a lot of these guys. Some other notes really quickly on the way out here. Arturi Newkirk, the second quarterback that Carolina had committed in the 2025 class. Of course, Merrill being a guy that's on scholarship. One thing that's interesting is he doesn't show up on 24/7 Sports breakdown of Carolina's class. So I'm going to keep checking that to make sure that it's an actual scholarship offer and not a preferred walk-on offer. But Newkirk, the other scholarship quarterback that they've landed in this class as of right now, what a leap he took. He became a 4-star in the 24/7 Sports rankings. Now, that is not the composite rankings. I want people to understand that. 24/7 Sports has their own rankings, and then you have the composite rankings, which combine their rankings with Rivals and ESPN. Now, the thing is that jump then leads to him taking a massive jump in the composite rankings. He jumps up nearly because he was ranked down in the 1800s. He jumps up almost a full 1,000 spots in the rankings. He's now the number 887 overall prospect in this class. And so that is huge. That shows you that there is really a lot of talent there with him. And if you go back and watch his tape, I think there's a lot of things that you're going to like about him. Do I think this means that he is in the quarterback competition right away? Maybe not, but he is certainly a guy that if those guys ahead of him struggle a little bit, he could be a guy that could eventually work his way in there. And most importantly, it just gives Carolina a legitimate depth guy at that position and someone that as long as he sticks around, if Carolina ever had to turn to him, there is enough talent there for him to be able to succeed. Meanwhile, another guy in the 2025 class that Carolina is trying to get on board, 3-star wide receiver Kennedy Uzama, the former Minnesota commit who was a part of the 2026 class, did reclassify to the 2025 class earlier in the year, or actually last year in the month of September, he ended up reclassifying. So he's been a guy that, has been out there for a while, but Minnesota thought they had him. He ends up backing off of that commitment. And now a guy that is 6'5" at the wide receiver position is out there, is available. He is pretty raw. That's going to be one of the things about him is that, he's played edge rusher. He's played wide receiver. They've kind of played him all over with his size. And so I think this is an upside pickup for Carolina. No doubt if they end up landing him, they are going to go in as the favorite to this weekend. But this is a guy that Carolina clearly wanted. And we'll see what he ends up becoming, because Minnesota, the reason he backed off of that commitment was because Minnesota was going to gray shirt him. They were going to use him basically as a guy that would be a member of their 2026 class, despite reclassing to 2025. They didn't think that he would be ready to perform there, and they were hoping that he would actually end up going to prep school. So Carolina, this is one of those ones where there is a little bit of risk here, but it could work out big time for Carolina down the road, so we'll have to see. Unranked athlete Madrid Tucker, actually right before we got on here for this edition of the podcast, he announced that he's down to 2 schools. Carolina and West Virginia are going to be the 2 schools that he is going to decide between. Shouldn't really be that shocking. West Virginia, another team that hired their coach late. This is a guy at 5'9", 155 pounds, small slot receiver that Carolina is hoping to develop. Another guy that's played a lot of different positions. I actually like him a lot on the defensive side of the ball at corner, but I don't think they're going to end up playing him there. I think they're going to use him as a wide receiver. So I do think he's a guy that Carolina really wants. We've seen already Carolina wants some of those smaller, shiftier receivers. That's what Bill Belichick really likes in his offense. And I think Tucker is one that fits that mold. So we'll have to see if Carolina can end up bringing him in. And a couple of guys in the 2026 class, 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis, the number 1 overall quarterback in the 2026 class. After an in-home visit with Carolina and Bill Belichick, he is now scheduling a visit to come to campus in April. That will be the first time that he will visit. And then you have 2026 quarterback, fellow 2026 quarterback, a 4-star, Brody McWhorter. He is set to be on campus this weekend. This will be his second visit to Chapel Hill. He visited back in 2022, but this one, actually Carolina trying to get seriously involved in his recruitment. That would be a big one for Carolina if they could pick up his commitment out of the state of Georgia. So all of those storylines will be on the website for you guys to check out. Any other news as well, we will have you covered. HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure you head there and check out all of the news that we've got going on right now around Carolina football. And of course, plenty of news coming out around Carolina basketball as well. Roy Williams helping the victims of Hurricane Helene. Josh has an article up there about that very gracious notion from the former coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. And when it comes to the current coach of the Tar Heels and his team, Josh has you covered on that front. It is the biggest weekend of the year, guys. It is the Duke weekend for Carolina, one of 2 of them that will be huge for you. And we have you covered with everything wall-to-wall coverage on the website as well as the podcast, the Four Corners podcast. So make sure you keep an eye out here on these same pages. We will be live tomorrow night after the game for you guys so that we can break down everything that went on. And if Carolina was able to find a way to get a miracle victory on the road against a Duke team that is soaring right now. So don't want to miss out on any of that. The best way to get all of that coverage is to either go to the website, check it out morning, afternoon, and evening with how many articles we're putting up, or you make it even easier on yourself. Just go over to the Twitter page at Heel Tough Blog on Twitter, follow the page, and then turn on the notifications anytime we put out an article, anytime that we go live on the podcast, anytime that we put out an edition of the podcast afterwards for you to listen to. all of that will come directly to you with a notification. That is the best way to do it. So that wraps up this edition of the show. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.